Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another edition of The Mandatory. Remember, if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Also, follow us on our social media channels. We're at The Mandatory TKO. You can also find us on the audio side as well, wherever you find your shows, podcasts. If you got a couple of minutes, leave a rate and review. Give us a 5-star because that helps the channel grow. And thanks so much for rocking with us this early morning, Tuesday morning. We do appreciate you for rocking with us. And remember, this is an interactive show, so please drop your comments because we will be getting to all of your comments. And it's a jam-packed show on this Tuesday because I think, Brian, there's a chance that fight could still happen. Because if this is a 4-deal fight, there's still a chance that it could possibly happen. Because what if Canelo decides to fight Jake Paul after?
Maybe.
Because it's a huge fight. Like, there would be a lot of money on the table, and I don't know why Canelo would want to leave that money on the table. And we know Jake Paul's just down to do it. So do you think there's a chance this could still happen? I think there's still going to be social media back and forth. It may not happen before, Bud, but it could happen after.
I think in the midst of this contract, it won't, because Turk and Jake Paul, I mean, you want to talk about...
They don't like each other. They don't like each other.
Which is real interesting, because I would say that there's a lot of people who don't like both of them. I think a lot of people in boxing would be on Turk's side in this. I'll abstain from going any further on that road. But we have Jake Paul calling out Canelo Alvarez. In fact, I'm going to try to play the video because I thought the video was really, really interesting. Okay, so... let's see what he had to say.
Oh, Canelo, you puta.
And this fucking YouTuber. I just fight real fighters.
Time to expose them. So we had a signed contract to fight. Here you can see Canelo's signature and my signature to the right. Claiming he's not fighting YouTubers. Bullshit. Look at the poster. We were announcing Tuesday, February 11th. Claiming he fights real fighters, but he's fighting Crawford, a 135-pound fighter, and running from a real fighter like David Benavidez, you bitch. The truth is, you can be bought. You're a money-hungry squirrel chasing your next nut. The truth is, these sports-washing shady characters are paying you hundreds of millions of dollars to stop our fight from happening because they couldn't fathom the fact that they can't create a bigger fight than me and you. Al Heyman has made you hundreds of millions of dollars, and you turned your back on him for this check. Disloyal. And you were begging to do this fight on pay-per-view. But I have loyalty. Loyalty to Netflix, doing the biggest numbers. And you call me a YouTuber, but you've never had a boxing match as big as mine. Remember, you told my team that your daughter came home and asked if you were fighting Jake Paul? She was all excited. You said that was the first time your daughter's ever asked you about a fight. And you're screwing over all your Mexican fans by doing your fights in Saudi. It just shows what type of person you are. And I promise you one thing, Canelo. Any fight that you do this year, mine will be bigger. So go fuck off to your boss, you Ring Magazine employee, you pink and orange bitch. And oh, fix that herpes on your lip, you dirty puta.
Yo, that may be one of the best videos of 2025. Let's save that one, Brian, because we're going to have it on the end of the year list. I'm not going to lie to you. He said a lot of stuff I felt was real.
Terrence Crawford is obviously not a 135-pounder. And I'm sure he knows that. I think he's just kind of trying to say, like, yo, you're fighting somebody who's really
smaller
really
than
not
you
in your weight class,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's just a form of insult there. But a lot of what he was saying, and boxing fans are, like, were in his mentions or whatever the case may be, just, you know, disagreeing with this, that, and third. But a lot of what he was saying, I mean, he's got some points.
There's some facts there. Like, when he said that he's kind of selling out his Mexican boxing fans and doing the fights in Saudi, like, that's real. Like, let's be honest here, because they travel for Canelo.
He called them a Ring Magazine employee. Essentially, everyone who signs with Riyadh Season, who owns Ring Magazine, I mean, look at who showed up to the gala to announce the relaunching of it. Like, those are a whole bunch of people who fight for Riyadh Season or in Riyadh Season as part of that. Like, yeah, like he's not entirely wrong. I know a lot of people are going to say that, but he's really not. Like, there are actually some points that he's making where he talked about with Canelo Alvarez. I don't know the shit about his daughter or whatever the case may be.
That was the funniest part, though. That may have been one of the funniest parts.
Like, he's a wrestling heel. You know what I mean? Like, I'm looking at it from the prism of, like, yes, he's he himself is not like, he's not like the kindest person in the world or whatever the case may be. I wouldn't say that, but like for a lot of people, for a large chunk of people, more than we would want to admit, there are a lot of people who would be more interested in Canelo versus Jake Paul than Canelo versus Terrence Crawford. And I know people in boxing are going to be like, oh, fuck those people, they're casuals, whatever, whatever. But it's like, that doesn't matter in relation to Jake Paul's point. That also doesn't matter in relation to Gate, in relation to all those different things. I think Turk also knows that, which is why he's allowing Canelo Crawford to take place in the States. Because if it took place in Riyadh season, no, it's not going to generate what it would if people from here actually go to the fight, which they're not going to do by and large if the fight is in Saudi Arabia. We know what's going on here sort of underneath the hood, which is why that fight seems to be the one that's going to take place here. But if Jake Paul were to fight Canelo Alvarez on Netflix, is that going to do better than Canelo Alvarez versus Terrence Crawford on DAZN pay-per-view?
That's not guaranteed. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but if it was on Netflix,
but you know what? It's way more accessible.
It's
way more accessible. At a time where in the beginning of 2025, people have really locked down on the streaming services, if you will. Not Amazon, but I'm talking about the ones that you gotta get a link for. They're not working the same way that they used to. Just like YouTube to MP4 converters and MP3 converters, they're not working the same way that they used to. You have to work harder to get these things now. So that makes the DAZN's pay-per-view of Jake Paul versus Terrence Crawford less accessible because a whole bunch of people are not going to pay for that fight. Whereas if you put Canelo Alvarez and Jake Paul on Netflix, everyone has Netflix. Everyone has access to Netflix, just about. Not everyone is going to have DAZN pay-per-view. I don't have DAZN pay-per-view. You know what I mean? I don't subscribe to DAZN. They don't give me enough good shit to want to subscribe to DAZN. And I don't watch soccer like that. And their fights are, they're fine. I'm not going to pay, what is it, $50 a month or whatever the case may be. I'm not doing that shit.
It's not $50 a month. I pay for DAZN pay-per-view, but only because you get NFL Sunday Ticket on there. So that was the reason why I got it.
I don't need that shit. It's fine.
I need that shit. But what I will say is I think obviously Jake Paul and Netflix would do crazy numbers, but I'm still thinking the boxing purists of this is obviously the fight that I want to see. This is a fight that I was talking about a year ago and everyone was saying, yo, it would never happen. And it's going to happen. The one thing that I will say though, is I know Jake Paul mentioned that Canelo's a sellout and Al Heyman made him all this money and he went over to Turk. I'll say one thing, and Bryan, you can attest to this as well, being in media, no one's going to be loyal to your ass. And companies and big business people, especially when you're working in the field of entertainment, they don't care about you. You're just sometimes a number and you got to go get yours. So it's I'm not going to ever hate on Canelo for going to get the bag. Because it's that's business sometimes, yo. That. You're going to stay loyal to a company. In media, you see how many people get laid off every year?
It's not that deep.
No, but I'm just saying.
I don't think the point.
I'm making the comparison of that of he didn't rock with Al Heyman and he left and he went and got paid. I'm never going to ever hate on someone for going to get paid.
I think we can hate on people for going to get paid in certain circumstances.
I wouldn't, because I think we can. Get paid.
I think we can. I think if you have issues with the regime over there, you can do that, which is what Jake Paul's issue is in relation to his video.
Because he hates Turk. Him and Turk don't like each other.
Right. But that's what he's saying. He's saying you went and took that money. But
let me tell you something though. Let me tell you something. If Jake Paul ended up having beef with Netflix, he'd be out too. He'd be like, peace. No, but I can hypothetically say that shit though.
Yeah.
I can hypothetically say that. But I'm just saying that I understand why Canelo did what he did. And that's my only point, because it's companies are not always going to be loyal to you. And you know this firsthand in media. You can stay with a company and rock with them, and then, they'll have crazy layoffs. And as you know, media companies have competitors, right? So it's just there's no loyalty anywhere. So it's it's easy to in entertainment. right? Like, it's easy to be like, yo, he left for the bag or whatever. But it's like, yo, if he wasn't getting paid and he wasn't getting what he wanted from Al Heyman and there were some issues there, I'm not going to be mad at that.
I think it's different. It's much different in terms of levels because, like, for me, I might have but so many options. Canelo Alvarez could make his own streaming service if he wants to. Like, he can literally come out with Canelo TV and put his fights there for all he gives a shit. You know what I mean? And they would do fine. Like, he has enough money to do that, I think. But to Jake Paul's point, I get what he's saying. I mean, you don't have to agree with it, but like,
I don't agree with it.
I understand it. I think, but also I want to be clear. I'm not advocating for Canelo Alvarez to fight Jake Paul.
Sounds like you were. I mean, it would be entertaining though. Like, let's not sit here. Let's not sit here and pretend that it wouldn't.
I'll tell you this because as a diehard, I'm not like super interested in seeing Canelo Alvarez fight Jake Paul from like an honor of the sports standpoint or whatever bullshit. But from an entertainment standpoint, like, I'd be more entertained watching that than a bunch of other fights against quote unquote real fighters. Like, if Canelo Alvarez is fighting William Skull, which looks to be the case in May, if you tell me, hey, would you rather watch Canelo Alvarez versus William Skull or Canelo Alvarez versus Jake Paul? I'm like, him knocking out Jake Paul with a body shot is probably more interesting than him just outboxing William Skull, who's stylistically not as interesting and who nobody watching this has never heard William Skull talk. You may have never seen him fight. And the atmosphere for the Canelo Jake Paul fight would be a lot better because it's going to be at like Cowboy Stadium or in Vegas or somewhere else, like where people are going to be there to actually watch what's going to happen, not to be there to be paraded around. Like, look at all this money we have. You should vacation here because we have all these people with a lot of money who are considered royalty just surrounding the ring just to show you like, hey, we run shit here, but you can be okay if you
wait, Brian, hold up. Let's also give away a car.
Yeah, right.
Let's stop all of this right now and give away a car. Right? Like, just ridiculous stuff that happens.
You know, like it's just to increase tourism. You know what I mean? Whereas the Jake Paul Canelo Alvarez fight, like, they're going to have a lot of people who are going to be like, hey, I want to see Canelo Alvarez kick his ass. You know, like,
that's why I would be watching. That's why I'd be watching. I would like the back and forth. Like, don't get me wrong. I respect Jake Paul as a businessman. I really hated on him early on. I was like not down with the fights. I hated when we did post fight lives for any of his fights. But then I just like really respected the businessman that he became, and I love that video he did because it is very wrestling-y. Right? It's like
he's good at what he does. I don't co-sign everything he does, like for the
but he's good at it. Like, let's give him credit there. Like, you gotta love that. I do want to get in some comments, Brian, before we get into the fights that we're gonna talk about. Obviously, our good friend Jesus says, "Who is Skull versus fake Nello?" I think a lot of people are gonna be saying that, right? Because it's not a fight that we really want. Also, Jesus says, 4 fights won't happen. That's a publicity stunt. Turk just wants Crawford to face fake Nello. I also believe that there's some truth in that, Brian, because I feel like some of what happened this past week was like, you know how they try to negotiate in boxing? I feel like it just had to do with negotiations and who had the upper hand. And that's why there was so much lying going on. I think Turk even said that he was putting out fake information.
I don't know if Turk is someone who's putting opt-outs in contracts. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only thing. I'm not sure. He doesn't strike me as a dude that's going to give you the equivalent of a player option, quote unquote, or a team option here. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I wonder what the contract would be. It'd be so scary to sign it.
Yeah,
I would be like scared for my life to sign a deal with him, man. Like,
yeah,
could you imagine? And like, it would be like
every contract. Pro tip for someone who's signed a lot of contracts in their day: every contract is breakable. Every single one. You just got to figure out legal ways to go about that.
Is a contract with him breakable or the guy? let's be serious. Like, do you die if you break the contract? Like, I would be like shaking. Jokes, but by the way, jokes. Just in case anyone sees this, jokes.
I mean, well, never mind. Not gonna say it.
Let's get into some more comments before Bryan and I are not here next time. We'll get to our good friend Adam Hurley, who's joining the show this morning. Canelo ducking Jake Paul now, shaking my head. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
He might be being sarcastic.
Of course. He also says, I just think it's kind of funny the way Paul ducked Dubois, but he wants to fight Canelo. Interesting. Would you want to see that fight? Jake Paul Dubois?
No. No, absolutely not. That one, I mean, like Jake Paul fighting a real boxer his size, like that, he might legitimately wind up in the hospital for a long time. Which some people would like. A lot of people would like, probably. No, Canelo Alvarez versus him is more interesting. If he beats Canelo Alvarez, which he won't, but if he beats Canelo Alvarez, then he can fight Daniel Dubois after. He will not beat Canelo Alvarez, though. I don't care how old Canelo Alvarez is, honestly.
He's not beating Canelo, but you know what's crazy is the fact that Jake Paul's could possibly get a fight with Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah,
like that's insane if you think about where Jake Paul came from. Like, and that blows my mind, and that's how good of a businessman he is, dude. Like, it's insane. Brian,
I want to add, this is my final thought because you were about to ask me.
Yes.
With Jake Paul, I'll say this: I think he does need something like this because I've been saying, and I want to be consistent. I've been saying like the reason the Mike Tyson fight did so well is because of Mike Tyson and the intrigue of can Mike Tyson knock out Jake Paul? Because if Jake Paul's gonna fight Mike Perry, Andre August, no one's going to care. Nate Diaz, people will care, but to a point, because Nate Diaz is also smaller and all those different things. I think if Jake Paul needs something, like he knows that for his next fight, that it's going to, if you're going to spark intrigue, he needs to fight either a really good actual pro boxer or somebody adjacent to that. Like, I don't know, even if he fought Roy Jones Jr., for example, that it would do terribly well after the Mike Tyson experience, right? I think because Carl Froch, I think, has been calling out or has called out Jake Paul before. And he was pissed off because I think Ariel Helwani said something to the effect of like, listen, a lot of people in the States wouldn't know who Carl Froch is if they fought. No, it wouldn't perform that well. And no disrespect to Carl Froch, but like, unless that fight's happening in the UK, like you can kind of keep it. So I don't know what Jake Paul's next opponent is going to look like. It may just be like another ho-hum type of thing. He'll probably fight like a pro boxer who's got this super padded record. So he could just be like, hey, I knocked out another pro boxer. And I think he's legitimately trying to angle and promote himself in a way that eventually gets him to a cruiserweight championship shot. And God bless him if that's the case. But okay, like he's 11-1 with 7 knockouts. He's been doing this for a while at this point. But I do think he quote unquote needs the Canelo Alvarez fight for intrigue. I don't think Canelo Alvarez needs it as much. Unless Canelo Alvarez is going to fight like William Skull 4 times, I think, he'll be fine. Like that's not going to happen. We know all roads lead to Canelo versus Crawford. So I don't think Canelo Alvarez needs Jake Paul in the same way Jake Paul may need Canelo, which is part of why the video is also the video. So
yeah, I don't think Canelo needs Jake Paul at all, but I think if he wanted to make more bread, yeah, that's a good way to do it.
That's the thing, though. He might make more fighting Jake Paul than he might for Terrence Crawford. I mean,
very true. Very true.
With Turk, that might not be true.